Hello, everyone. My name is Merike Sirelpuu, and I'm here with Professor Dolores Cahill, President of World Freedom Alliance. I'm Chairman of World Freedom Alliance, and our amazing friends from Finland, Ossi and Christian. And we have some very urgent news from Finland. A woman has been brutally arrested and her rights have been violated severely. And we would really like to hear straight from you exactly what is happening. So please go ahead and brief us.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Yes, police came to the summer cottage of Merike Sirelpuu's husband, and they took her there and take her to the hospital by force with handcuffs, and they even put a cuff on his head, and they took her to the hospital and forcibly took a PCR test in front of the hospital, so not even inside but outside, against the police car with force. Another policeman took his head and kept it in place, and they took the PCR test, and then they put her into the hospital of Iisalmi, and kept her contained there 24 hours. And now she's still there, and she needs a international help, and any help we can give. That's the short story.
So we're very happy in the World Freedom Alliance to shine a spotlight on this case. Go ahead.
There's a new law that's just come in place in the last few weeks that gives the government more access and more lawful ways of enforcing the law for spreading diseases. So obviously the other side will say that she has been harming people by possibly spreading COVID around and not complying with the law of testing and so on. So, and this has become a quite hot potato here in Finland, and it's in every news. And this is the first case where a corona patient or COVID patient has been publicly put out as a possible danger, and also with a picture. So her identity and her picture has been spread by the police, and then it's been picked up by all of the news media, and they have put it out with the idea that justified it by saying that because she hasn't wanted to give out the information, this is a precautionary thing that they need to do to warn the people that has possibly been around her and in her yoga studio and where she has been cleaning apartments and so on. And it is unprecedented.
Yes, actually, she has given all the information to the police and health authorities, but
this is the media's version
police,
of it.
Yeah, the police even lied directly into the newspaper that she wouldn't have given any information, but that's not true. She has been very cooperative, but and she was in quarantine in their cottage, and the police came there and took her out from there. That's totally insane for all this thing. And they even took the phone out of her room in the next day when they realized that Merike sent the video and some message to me, so they took the phone off from her. So that's revenge from the police.
So maybe we should say, first of all, you know, that people have all around the world inalienable rights of privacy and bodily integrity. And if there is a public health emergency, then I would say that in Finland, you should rally around this individual case, this individual person, and that maybe, you know, we can sequence the PCR, or that the government of Finland, if they're declaring a public health emergency, I'm very happy that the Prime Minister of Finland gives us the sequences of a positive PCR test, and I'm leading the PCR consortium in the world. And so we can get this lady to do a PCR test, and Finland can sequence it, and we can sequence it in the PCR consortium. And if it's not SARS-CoV-2, then she should be sequencing damages for millions, right? From the individual policeman who basically burgled into her home and false arrest. So I think what I would encourage you to do in Finland is to get people who know the law and inalienable rights of privacy and bodily integrity and any criminal behavior. And I would personally be very happy to support this case. And we are in the World Freedom Alliance. So let us then ask the world, you know, because if Finland is declaring a public health emergency based on a PCR test, then let them send the PCR test to us. And we are working with Professor Shin Lee, the world expert. And let's say this individual lady, her test is the test case in the world, that if it's SARS-CoV-2, you know, we can say fine, and that Finland can produce the virus that is underpinning the public health emergency.
And she was asking I think it was a psychiatrist that she was talking to. She was asking about the CT number for the test, but apparently
no. But I think what we need to do is actually, you know, the manufacturer of whatever they forcibly tested her, right? The police. So that we need to check what the actual manufacturing and call out the individual police, because, you know, if you have inalienable rights to privacy and you cannot be discriminated against, because if they were doing this to her, if she was HIV positive or if she was in a wheelchair, everyone would say, wait a minute, this is discrimination. This is a health information. If she was HIV positive, you know, that the police cannot be actually invading her home. And, you know, and in Nuremberg, the police have to take individual responsibility, and we have the video. But also, if the Finland is saying that this test is for SARS-CoV-2 and they are detaining her based on this, then we just need to get the manufacturer of the test or this lady. And if it's false, and if the police have done wrong, we're moving now, at least I am, to project accountability, that the individual police, because it's no longer good enough now for police, you know, since Nuremberg, to say they were just following orders. And whoever your prime minister is and minister for health, they have to provide evidence now that they sequence these tests and they are SARS-CoV-2, right? And that's the causative agent of COVID-19. Yeah, if that's what they're saying, so let's use this as the test case in the world. And I'm leading this, it's called the #Testgate. It's the PCR consortium. We have forensic labs. So we're very happy that this lady, when she's released from prison, she can do a test. Or the government can make this test that they infringed on all of her inalienable rights to take, and let's just sequence it. This is an example, this case, for the world and for the Prime Minister in Finland.
Yes, I mean, this is obvious. To take someone from their home and forcibly do medical, you know, procedure on someone, just that should be enough. And then to even, you know, confine her as a prisoner, as a criminal, this is outrageous. This is just madness. And this is so important for the world to see, because in Sweden, we still are kind of asleep, and a lot of countries, this is already happening, but we need to stand up, because it's there, you know, the limits are being drawn a bit longer and a bit longer. They're taking our freedoms bit by bit, so that we don't react to it. So
well
we need to react to this very strongly, because if you see in other genocides that have happened, or other very serious events in history, this is what has been done. You declare someone as a dangerous sort of people that are kind of not human, and that you can do anything to. So right now we see the people who don't take vaccines or are critical to the current narrative being, you know, they look at us like like we're crazy, like we are dangerous to society, etc. So that is one step to actually commit very serious offenses like we're seeing here. in Finland. And can you say a bit more about what was the reason? What was the reason that they could actually confine her and do these very harsh measures on her?
It is quite obviously overreaction. There was no reason at all. She was already in her or their summer cottage in self quarantine. So actually, police can take her out from the quarantine, which is absurd. And she didn't deny to come to the tests, but she has some sort of blood disease that the test couldn't be taken from the nose, and she even had the papers from that, but police and the doctors ignored this. And this is every possible way. This is against the dignity and law.
Yes, and I also want to say to the Finnish police and police all over the world that whatever orders you get that are against our natural rights, our basic human rights, that are against the all the codes, the basic codes to serve and protect, it's not legal to actually go through with these orders. Like, we're working with Police for Freedom that are uniting police from all over the world.
Yeah.
And there are lots of police also waking up to the fact that this is not what they signed up to. They didn't sign up to attack their own people. And this is when this starts to happen. It's very, very serious. So every policeman in Finland and all over the world should take a second thought about what orders that you are following, because in the long run, just like you say, this is going to be punished. This is going to be viewed very seriously.
I think, Monica, before, rather than just being viewed and all that, that actually we have to actually put the weight of the people in the world behind holding them to account. So, in the United Kingdom,
they will be held to account.
And is engaged in this, it's 14 years in prison. And the same in Ireland, it's between 10 and 20 years in prison. So I think we have to move away from asking now, that we have to say, to call this out, that this is actually criminal behavior. It's unlawful, right? So the difference is that if you have someone infringing against your basic freedoms and rights, that is unlawful behavior, as opposed to governments can, write down on piece of papers acts and bills and regulations. But there is a higher hierarchy of law, which is you have these inalienable rights of bodily integrity, freedom of speech, access to justice. And anyone, a doctor or a policeman, even if the government brings in something, it really only has the weight of law if it goes to the higher courts and it's proved to be in compliance with our inalienable rights. So removing someone forcibly from the family home is against your right to a private life, family life, privacy. And then forcing a medical intervention is what they did, in Germany, we've seen it all around the world, in China and in Russia. And that whoever actually forced the test on her is committing, it's unlawful. Even if the government brought in some act, the act itself can be unlawful. And then you can hold the Prime Minister to account. So I think what we need to do is understand the difference between law is like our inalienable rights of freedom, bodily integrity, privacy. Legal is just something that a government can do, but it's actually a crime for the Parliament and the members of Parliament and the Prime Ministers and presidents to sign acts that are unlawful. That's actually, and the crime in English-speaking countries will say it's called malfeasance in public office, but all around the world. So it would be like if a Prime Minister brought in a law to say the police can shoot every second person, right? That just because they do, so what they're doing is actually illegal, right? And if it was brought to the High Court, they are committing crimes. So what we need to do, this will only end in Finland if someone actually says, right, we need to take a case and we need to actually charge the police and we need to tackle the situation of this criminal and unlawful behavior. And if this was the case to go around Finland, we can only push back on this globalist agenda of infringing on our rights all around the world, one case at a time, one person at a time. But if we were to go behind this one, I have a travel case of an Irish person in France today going home. And there are individual cases of someone who couldn't buy water last night in Ireland in a shop, and the police arrested them and detained them. Can you imagine if that was a mother with a small baby, because she didn't wear a mask, that baby didn't get milk, right? Or someone didn't get water or didn't get food. That what I'm saying is we need brave families and people and countries to say, this is an example of the police engaging in criminal behavior because the politicians in Finland have brought in some act that is actually unlawful. And this has to go potentially to your equivalent High Court and Supreme Court. But I think at the same time, we should be charging the policeman with unlawful behavior. And what I'm saying for Project Accountability is that policeman doesn't deserve his salary or pension from yesterday or today, and that she can then be suing him for millions personally for engaging in criminal behavior of breaking into her house, unlawfully detaining her, and unlawfully, everyone has bodily integrity. So you cannot actually force someone without consent into something. That's the whole basis of the law. So if we don't do it, the rule of law in our countries is undermined, and we all then have to stand for election, so that we challenge all these politicians, as independents or whatever, and say, no, we don't want a country where the police engage in criminal behavior and forcibly break in and detain people and coerce them into medical intervention. So either way, take a precedence case, or we all stand for election in all of our countries and say no. You know what I mean? So I would just support this as an example of a precedence case.
Yes,
Yeah.
for sure. And I'd like to repeat something that Robert Kennedy Jr. said. It's the constitutional rights are not there when it's appropriate for the politicians. They're there as fundamental rights that are there permanently in all times, all cases.
Yeah.
They should not be breached whatsoever, because that's when and this is something people have fought for ages and ages. And are we just going to give that up like this because we believe this crazy narrative that's going on with no logic or science behind it, with thousands and thousands of doctors and experts like Dolores and all over the world giving another completely different story? And I can also say we talked to actually an expert on the risks of the PCR that can be very severe. A facial surgeon that really, a whistleblower that came to us that could really testify on that there are great risks with this PCR test.
Well, there was a 42-year-old in Ireland that just lives not very far away from me that died directly after, within, she had got severe headaches and bleeding after the test, and then she died 4 days later very painfully.
So to actually do this forcefully, when we have the data that people have died from this, and she even had a medical condition behind, this is very, very serious. This could be what I would say, risking her life even. So to do this in this way, it's very, very serious. And we from the World Freedom Alliance really see the seriousness of this situation, and we really stand behind and demand that she is released instantly, and that this is really investigated thoroughly, so that this is not happening again in Finland whatsoever. And this is something for the whole world to actually consider, that we will not, pass the line further on moving away from a fundamental right, such as this case shows. And it just has to stop now. It's going too far. We're not accepting any more breaches of our fundamental rights, such as
So playing the devil's advocate here for a second, the motivation behind the government and their action to this is that according to the law of spreading diseases, in case the leading doctor of that area states that this person is, they have reason to believe that they might have a contagion, okay? So there was no proof of her having a contagion. There was only a reason to believe. They can enforce a forceful testing.
So
okay?
no, maybe I can tell you there's what's called a hierarchy in law, right? In hierarchy of law, okay? So what you say is entirely wrong.
I know, and I'm just
saying though, what you're saying is entirely wrong, okay? So this whole narrative is based, so there's a hierarchy of law, and in the hierarchy is people, men and women, from the minute that they're born, from the second, have inalienable rights of freedom of speech, freedom of travel, and bodily integrity, and that nothing written down, you don't get these rights from anything written down. They're with you because you are born and you are human, and nothing that is written down or that any government can do can infringe or take away from these rights. And if a politician, right, this is the natural law, the rule of law, does that, it's a criminal, and the prime minister and the ministers, it's criminal behavior. So just because they are engaged in the parliaments in putting in written down, you know, pieces of paper that they move around, they can never take away our inalienable rights, for bodily integrity, freedom of speech. And if they do, it's criminal behavior. So what I'm saying, more than what Merike is saying, is not only do we say we're not having it, is that we need to actually charge, which they're doing in the United Kingdom, the politicians as individuals with the criminal behavior of infringing, because the lockdown for 1 year is shortening everybody's life in the world by 1 year. So that if you have, you know, in Ireland, we have 5 million people. So that means that everyone who lives in Ireland has lost 5 million years of life, right? There's huge harm. If it's 70 million people in the UK, Boris Johnson has taken away 70 million years of life. So this is not the kind of death and illness that was caused in the concentration camps. What they're doing is reducing people's lives in their homes and in the hospitals. And so this is criminal behavior. And the doctors that are you know, saying that tests are for SARS-CoV-2, what we're saying is, guys, the time is up now. We're going to take your test from the manufacturer and actually check if this PCR is SARS-CoV-2. If it is, if it's not, the governments are engaged in false procurement and fraudulently paying taxes when the government of Finland should check this test, right? So there's a hierarchy of crimes here. The police are invading someone's home and unlawfully detaining her and engaging in criminal behavior by forcing her to do tests, which is against all laws, including the Nuremberg Code, where doctors and police, you know, and people that were engaged in similar behavior over 50 years. So what we're saying is, it's not just asking them, we're actually turning around and saying there's a lot of criminal behavior infringing on people's inalienable rights, even under the guise of criminally bringing in acts that are in themselves unlawful, and that the police and the courts are also colluding by not actually saying, no, we will not engage. So the individual, whoever took the test for her, what I'm saying is you need to actually start having a charge for that policeman for unlawful detention or kidnapping and for infringing on her rights, right? So if you were to do something like that, to do something, it could be, you know, in the spectrum of either kidnapping, battery, you know, rape, you know, that's the kind of unlawful behavior that's going on, and unlawful detention and kidnapping. So we don't just stand by and say, we want to stop it, we want to release. You need to actually say you need to challenge the police and the prime minister. Is the test what it's supposed to be? Is there a basis for this public health emergency? And the policeman has to be held to account for kidnapping her, unlawfully detaining her, and forcing her, coercing her into a medical intervention.
Well said, Dolores, well said.
No, but we need to call it out. You know what I mean? It's not just what they're saying. If you see, it's almost like it's criminality that's going on, right? It's criminality.
And we need to call it for what it is, because we need to stay human, like, period. This is not human behavior. This is not, you know, you wouldn't do this to your neighbor or to your friend. someone that you care about, this is not the way that you do it. It's just simply not human, and we need to remember that. And any behavior that isn't human, that is really clearly violating these natural laws, these our born rights, should be recorded, should be called out, should be exposed. We need to document everything that is going on.
And that's really what Ossi is doing with this case, is documenting and adding stuff, adding interviews and adding stuff as it goes along. Do you want to say something, comment on this, Ossi, so far?
Well, I have some more information about this case, and it will come into the light tomorrow, I think. So, and we will do some supporting actions in Iisalmi, perhaps. We will see. I hope she will be released tomorrow, but if not, there will be some demonstrations, etc. on Saturday. We will see. There's lots of other things that should be considered in this case. There are several mistakes during the process.
Yeah, starting from setting up the law and enforcing the law and that whole thing.
So I think the thing is, you see, it's not the law, right? These are acts that are unlawful. So language is important, okay? Yeah. So you have the rule of law, and then they are bringing in regulations, but they are only laws if they actually are challenged. They go to the higher courts and are proved to be lawful. So kind of what, something is legal, but it's only lawful if it's actually consistent with the hierarchy of laws. So we have to be accurate in our language. So what they have done is brought in some unlawful regulations, and it's crimes of malfeasance, because the Minister for Justice and your Attorney General equivalent, your chief lawyers, and the Prime Minister and the President, by them signing these acts, is actually engaging in unlawful and criminal behavior. And in our country, that's up to, it's actually treason, okay? It's a crime of treason, which is lifetime in prison for prime ministers. So, and in our country, okay? So there are huge penalties for governments and individual members of elected representatives engaging in bringing in acts that are actually unlawful. So it's malfeasance, yeah?
So who would be the institutions to charge these prime ministers and all of
so
these
you
things?
Would just need one case. So in my case, right, what I would do if I were you is that you need to get a team of people that you would injunct. You go to the higher courts. So as we see, the lower courts are often unlawfully dealing in maritime law, corporate law, fining. But your High Court and Supreme Court, at least in all of the Commonwealth countries, have to uphold the rule of law, and they swear an oath to uphold our inalienable rights of freedom of speech, bodily integrity, the right to travel and access to justice. So you could simply injunct the President and the Minister for Justice for the rule of this act, that it's actually infringing on inalienable rights. And you would say, can we look at what happened here to see if it was lawful? And I would recommend, like the pots and pans, that you don't just stop when she's released. You use this one case, because in all of our countries, under the rule of law, if a government act or regulation infringes on one person's rights and it goes to the Superior Court, the entire act is dismissed as the entire act is unlawful and is thrown out. And what they're doing in countries is they're not enforcing fines, they're dropping the fines so that no case will actually get to the courts, so that it will be proved to be unlawful. So that's what you need to do. So you just injunct. And that's why you find the individual policeman, if 3 police invaded her home, I would be countercharging them for burglary, for unlawful detention, for essentially, whatever your equivalent of rape are, right? Because they actually put something into her body that she did not consent, forcibly. And you countersue the individual police, and you injunct the Prime Minister to say you cannot have the police engaging in criminality. That's what you do.
So Ossi, you have been in touch with Lauri, who's her legal representative. Have you gotten any information how he stands on this whole thing currently?
There will be a criminal charges against all the doctors and the policemen involved in this process.
Great.
Quite soon, probably tomorrow, maybe on Monday next week.
Great, because that's in Sweden we have Conny Andersson, an ex-policeman. He's encouraging everyone to really report any infringements on our rights, because just like I said, this is a way to document what is happening also in history for the future, that we have, even though there's a lot of corruption also within our legal systems, we need to at least, you know, continue just to report and document, and also tire them out to say we're not giving up. We're never giving up on these fundamental rights, because in a way, all of these things that they're doing, there's attacks left, right, and center, because in the World Freedom Alliance, we hear a lot about what is really happening. And it's, you know, both good stuff and really awful things like this.
And yeah, there's one little thing
just like they're doing, we need to do the same. We need to
but there's another
them out.
additional angle, right? That she has suffered personal harm, right? So anyone who would burgle your house, you can actually sue them for loss, harm, and injury and causation of anxiety. So what we've been doing in Ireland is saying to families or individual people who are injured is that you can actually not only sue for criminal behavior, but you can sue the policeman personally for his assets, or if he's in as the prime minister, for the loss and harm that she has done. Okay, how she has reputational damage, she caused anxiety. So like doctors and professionals may have indemnity insurance, but you can actually sue them for money. Like she can say the injury for her and her reputation is up to 1 million or €500,000. So she can take a private action against the personal policeman. That's what we're doing, or against the police, if they have indemnity insurance, you know, professional insurance, but if not, against their home. Because it's only when the police or anyone doing criminal behavior, not only, you know, because we're dependent on the courts, and if the courts are not acting, upholding the law, but an individual can sue an individual for loss, harm, anxiety as well, right? And so someone burgling your home, unlawfully detaining you, you know, it's her body, her choice, right? That is a crime that she can sue him in her private capacity, one person, for injury, harm, loss, anxiety. And if I was her, I would be happy to recommend up to €500,000 of loss, harm, anxiety, suffering for the loss to her reputation against individually the policemen. And that's when suddenly the police come out from behind their uniform. If they're engaging in something that's burglary, unlawful detention, the equivalent of putting something into her body that she did not consent to, that you can sue them and their house or their assets or their pension or their salary. And I would say that if this is true, what you're reporting, then she has a good case.
Because it's also to turn around the fear. This is really pushing her as an example to scare other people. And we see this happening all over the world, that you are kind of showcasing these cases so that people will be afraid, so that people will comply. But in this way, we install fear as well, because they should be afraid, because this, just like Dolores saying, this is criminal behavior, period. And in the long run, these people doing these criminal behaviors should be afraid that, you know, that their house will be taken, that there will be, you know, arrests or criminal charges against them in the future, because that is in history, that has happened, and this is going to happen again. And we need to also remember who they're serving, who is actually appointing them. We are the ones that are actually, you know, paying them to do a service to us. And when police, when politicians, when all of these people are not serving us anymore, guess what? They should be out of office, and we should make sure they're out of office. And we should.
That's why I think it's important in Finland that people then, you know, can stand as individuals, you know, either a new freedom party on very much the principles of bodily integrity, freedom of speech, and all of us, everyone should go for every local election. And it turns out the political parties across the world are really hollowed out. Nobody is supporting them. And then, you know, you can have a parallel campaign of just making sure the electoral register is fair, and then, you know, have a countrywide process to have oversight of the ballots. And then everyone stand for election, local elections, general elections, and then actually reassess the police and the court system if they're engaged in criminality. And the ones who are now police and courts in 2021, they actually, you know, the new election, you could say, guys, if you're doing criminal behavior, we'll account it, but you will all lose, you're all not working anymore. You know, the civil service, we need you when the new government comes in to swear an oath that you will engage in lawful behavior. And anyone now, and that's, I've been involved in how societies recover, like after Rwanda, you know, after, you know, there's a process, if there is upheaval, whether it's caused by natural or by governments, and how you build a new government is actually make the previous government, you know, replace them in a way. And that if there is, you could have a Truth and Reconciliation Commission, that if any of the civil service or police have one case against them that's documented in Finland, that they will not be eligible to apply for their job. You know, that they essentially have engaged in gross misconduct, and that they cannot actually be a politician or a policeman. And so that you would be then saying to people, if you engage, and that you have to ask the policeman to identify themselves, and if they don't, it's a crime of more than 10 years, you know. So that if a policeman doesn't, you can then seek to identify who is on duty, you know, through freedom of information. So I think that's what, you know, in Rwanda, in Germany, in Russia, in China, all over the world, that people, if there is a, you know, an insidious undermining of the rule of law over years, the only way to stop it is to push back against individual people. And this is the transition we have to make in 2021. And I think in the World Freedom Alliance, we'd be very honored in countries to take example cases. And then the world, you know, we could engage with you once a month or whatever to follow this up and have the eyes of the world on that policeman. And Catherine Austin Fitz says, which I agree with, is that individual policeman has to be then really well known in Finland for engaging in criminal behavior, and shun, you know, highlight him to say, this is not what, we do not pay police for you to engage in criminal behavior. It's gross misconduct. You don't deserve your salary or your pension. We're going to hold you criminally to account. She has the right to sue you for damages up to 2 million. And the world, the eyes of the world are on you, Mr. Policeman. And the next policeman tomorrow or next week in Finland, we will do the exact same thing to them and make it more uncomfortable for police to be engaged in criminal behavior and to call out the police and the Prime Minister. We have to do it sometime. You either do it now in March 2021, or we have to do it in 5 years' time when it's more difficult.
We have to remember it's our countries. It's not politicians' countries. It's not, you know, pharmaceutical companies' countries. It's our countries. And guess what? We can do something about it. We shouldn't let, you know, this overwhelm happen, or this hopelessness. And that's what the World Freedom Alliance is about. Also, when we join together, then we are strong. Then we can support each other like this. We can expose it much better. We can give each other good examples of how we can actually turn this around. So I'm very, very happy to support you, and we will follow what the procedures, what is going on. But I just clearly want to say to the world and to Finland and to all of you listening that the World Freedom Alliance demands the release of Merike Sirelpuu immediately. And this comes from an organization now growing and with new countries joining every week. We have had, you know, millions of people all over the world, you know, watching our documentaries, joining our organization. So we're really growing in numbers, and people that are waking up to the fact that we are not going to comply with all of this criminal behavior, and we are strong together, and we can unlock the world instead of locking it down if we just stand up together. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.